The Gaian Imperium. First Contact. Hierarchy Border World, Z979. I am a Liath Beta. Designation GT Z104. I was birthed from my pod on world Z979 to be a ground trooper, a soldier born and stationed here on the border of hierarchy space. Behind us is the long stretch of the hierarchy, tens of thousands of worlds under their umbrella, many more that number of sentient living beings. A few hundred different varieties, each one unique in a variety of ways, each one similar in others, and yet no one could predict the next species to enter the galactic stage. First contact is usually done methodically. A civilization reaches its apex and then reaches beyond its world, beyond its solar system. That means FTL travel. That's what brings the hierarchy's attention, and they send envoys and conduct peaceful negotiations of the fledgling world to enter the hierarchy. Sometimes, scouts find a fledgling world and its people show promise, and so they are studied, or in some extremely rare instances uplifted, if they are already close to developing FTL. These strangers from the unknown regions, beyond hierarchy space, they showed up like a prayer. Factions in the hierarchy will on occasion grow tired of their station and will do a display of strength. They send their fleet to a planet and occupy it. Defending forces must defend it. Civilized warfare. Still, loss of life is unavoidable. So when a Nymphilian fleet was detected approaching our outpost, a simple border world here to listen for anything coming from the unknown regions, we immediately wondered why. I later learned the Nymphilians were eager to explore that whimsical nature of theirs and that mysticism. They claimed their priests felt something big coming. They were right. Still, in the moment we wondered why they were coming with such a force. We initiated contact and were told to surrender. As per standard DOS procedure, we told them no and prepared our defences and set the distress beacon. We knew we wouldn't survive, born in pods to serve a higher purpose, fight and die for the hierarchy. That's why the Liath sit at the top of the hierarchy. We have the most advanced technology and can spawn legions of soldiers in weeks. Hours pass. The fleet is in orbit and bombarding us. Sensors still worked, but it was me and less than 100 others in the bunker watching. Automated defences fighting orbital bombardment. Shields holding over important infrastructure. All standard procedure. We weren't enough to stop a ground occupation and would be exterminated. We had completed the final preparations when I had noticed a comm was open. A massively wide broadcast. Every frequency was being hailed. I pulled up sensors to get a read on what was doing it. It wasn't the Nymphilian. They know the standard hierarchy communication channels. This was someone who doesn't know them. At first I saw the Nymphilian ships, elegant constructions, smooth curves, shapely, slender, nimble and agile, and capable of short and powerful shots. Then I followed the signal to its source. Some kind of distortion around it was disrupting our scanning, but it eventually faded. A single, massive ship. I hadn't thought such a size of ship was possible, let alone needed. And what an ugly ship it was. Sharp angles along a 15,000 metre length, a 6,000 metre height, and 4,000 metre width. It was like a giant spear, and it was screaming. Some unknown language. My curiosity piqued more. I am a Liath, after all. First contact. Here in a war zone. We assumed our distress beacon wasn't interpreted properly, until the constant rambling broadcast started to make sense. It was some kind of brute force translation program, spamming nonsense in vague similarities to our distress signal. The Nymphilians were broadcasting back, telling the vessel to not interfere. The ship was massive, but it had no force fields, and it was barreling through space at a slow speed. Whatever it used to get here wasn't a standard FTL drive, and with how it distorted space around it when it first arrived, I can't imagine what brute force method they used to get here, but it was brute force. Eventually, a communication from them made sense. It learned from the responses from the Nymphilians. A simple retort. Attacking fleet. Stand down or you will be put down. The Nymphilians didn't respond and simply resumed bombardment. What happened next was recorded for all to see. This monster of a ship barreled through space with amazing speed, and placed itself between the Nymphilians and our world. Never before had this been recorded. A fledgling race without conventional FTL, without shielding, with just its hull between it and the void, stood in defiance of a technologically superior race. They broadcast again, becoming much easier to understand. This is the IN Columbus. We are an exploration vessel, but we will not stand by as you harass this world. Stand down, or we will give you one hell of a blooded nose. An exploration vessel? 15,000 meters long? I scanned the vessel more in depth, now that it was closer. So many life signs. The Nymphilian wouldn't stand for such a display, as they were there to prove their strength in capturing and holding a world. So they fired upon the unshielded vessel. A single high-powered plasma shot at the ship's engines to disable it. I watched the blast strike against the vessel. The engines sputtered, but did not go out. Their hull sizzled, but did not break. What happened next I can only describe as a barbaric lashing out. The exploration vessel IN Columbus had weaponry we didn't recognize initially. But then we saw the dots of heat along the angular hull. We watched as the Nymphilian shields flickered. Projectile weaponry? In space? These are a truly archaic people. But the Nymphilian shields held, for a few moments. The barrage was endless, and so they moved. Their shields could only handle so much, and yet the massive ship kept up its assault. They sure know how to use those weapons. They move slow in space, but they managed to keep up with some of the ships. Others dropped their shields to attack, and we recoiled as plasma blasts and laser weapons beat onto the ship's hull, only to leave a mark. I wished I had a better sensor suite. That ship without shielding was taking dozens of plasma and directed energy blasts all across its surface, and it just stood there taking it. Then its engines died. It hovered there in orbit, having enough power to maintain itself. The Nymphilian broadcasted their victory, calling for the ship to stand down. No, I don't think we will. A massive energy spike was detected. They had energy weaponry this whole time, I thought, but it required such massive amounts of their energy to use. 4 cannons deployed along its side facing the Nymphilian fleet. They detected the energy signal as well. Such an inefficient energy weapon would be inaccurate and be mostly a light show, but they still had their shields up and were moving defensively. I swear I could feel the force as those cannons fired. 4 cannons shot, 4 Nymphilian ships were disabled, their command vessel, and 3 support carriers. Those shots punched through their shields and blasted through the ships, shredding 2 in half. The command vessel was intact, but its reactor was disabled. The last one's reactor went critical and exploded. And it wasn't energy weaponry, it was a projectile weapon again. A high-powered magnetic cannon. They shut off their engines to power 4 cannons to hold projectiles with enough force to overload the Nymphilian shields and continue on to punch through the ship itself. Needless to say, they won the fight. The Nymphilian fleet gathered survivors and fled. The IN Columbus hovered over our world and landed their forces. It was first contact with a new spacefaring race. I knew I was woefully unprepared for such a duty. Hierarchy protocols are clear on First Contact Protocol. If you spot an unknown FTL signal, report it. Politicians take it over from there. They had no FTL signal, but surely the Nymphilians would report them. I was thankful for my continued existence, and was eager to see these new beings myself. So as their forces landed, I watched as their ships came down. More ugly, angular designs. They looked like flying creatures with wings coming down from the clouds. Their ships landed, and soldiers poured out. I watched as they took up defensive stances all around, as if expecting Nymphilian ground forces. Paranoid, but intelligent. Troops in thick armor, pressurized suits near as I could tell. Paranoid, but understandable. Their colors were strange. Black made up most of their coloration. Green was the second most abundant, and then purple. Void, life, and poison. Hopefully these colours held different meanings for these people. It was silent other than their stomping around. A singular one among them in the same armour as the rest. The only difference I noticed was an emblem on their shoulder, of some symbol. They approached me and spoke for their translator. Any wounded? I shake my head. Casualties? I sigh and try to recall the number. 294 dead, 6 alive and uninjured. Their shoulders droop and they squat down, eye level with me, a comforting hand on my shoulder. A strange people. Sorry we were too late. We weren't prepared enough to handle an alien signal and translate it in time. A sigh escaped them, and they stood up, almost as tall as an alpha, imposing. Either way, we are here now. You won't have any more trouble from whoever those assholes attacking you were. And who are you? I heard the chuckle. I could recognize the tone of pride in their voice when they spoke next. We are the Gaian Imperium, the hammer and shield of the people.